The invitation had smelled faintly of citrus and menace. Jonah Kessler knew it was a bad sign the moment he opened the shimmering envelope and a holographic ribbon sprang out, shouting in a language that sounded like a cross between a foghorn and interpretive beatboxing. By the time the translation chip clicked in, the message had already declared his full name, homeworld, approximate cholesterol level, and then warmly welcomed him to the royal union ceremony of His Radiance King, Voron of Siralivex and her supreme daughter Sarava the Undimmed. He should have said no, should have sent one of the interns, or better yet, a diplomatic hologram programmed to nod politely and laugh when appropriate. But no, he was Jonah Kessler, cultural attaché to the Orion Expanse, which basically meant he was Earth's least threatening envoy. He'd once negotiated a ceasefire using only a ukulele and 3 unlicensed metaphors. That made him harmless, likable, and very available for wedding assignments that involve glowing food and awkward seating arrangements. His shuttle landed on Siralivex during their bright season, when the atmosphere shimmered with bioluminescent particles that clung to every exposed surface, including skin, clothing, and unfortunate facial hair. By the time Jonah reached the palace, he looked like a walking firework trying to attend a funeral. The palace itself was a monument to architectural bravado, 12 towers spiraling like question marks into the upper stratosphere, their outer walls alive with flowing script that morphed whenever someone important walked by. Jonah tried walking confidently. The walls insulted his posture. Inside, he was greeted by a man whose robes appeared to be stitched from fog and poor judgment. "You are the Terran?" the man asked, his long ears twitching with barely contained disdain. "Ambassador Jonah Kessler. But please, call me Jonah. Unless you've got a title for guy who eats too much at the buffet, in which case, that one works too." The robed man did not laugh. Sirali humor, Jonah recalled, was subtle, deeply symbolic, and often involved interpretive coughing. They led him through a procession of halls carved from memory stone, each wall retelling ancient victories via shifting images. Kings battling gravity whales, queens reshaping continents with a glance, diplomats turned into statues for accidentally sitting in sacred chairs. Jonah made a mental note to never sit again. Eventually, he was deposited in the grand reception chamber, where alien nobles hovered, some literally between conversation clusters, every one of them taller, shinier, and far more coordinated than Jonah. A Kairali woman approached carrying a tray of translucent cubes. Jonah grabbed one, chewed carefully, and immediately regretted it. "Ah, yes," the tray carrier said in a monotone. "Fermented clarity sponge. It will loosen your dreams for a week." "I have very fragile dreams," Jonah said, coughing politely into a napkin. "They're mostly about paperwork and losing my keys." There was a chime, not a sound, but a vibration in the bones, ceremonial, rhythmic, and a little like being politely electrocuted. All heads turned as the doors parted to reveal the king. Varun strode in flanked by armored attendants, his robes a constellation in motion, his ears long enough to make elves feel insecure. At his side, not quite behind, walked the princess, Sarava. She was less imposing than Jonah expected and far more terrifying. Her presence hit like a gravity shift. She wore armor that shimmered between states of matter, her hair coiled like black smoke pinned with silver, and her expression was the universal one for, "I could end you in 17 ways and still make my appointment." She made eye contact with Jonah. He gave a small, respectful nod. She tilted her head as if trying to identify a strange insect in her soup. Ceremony began. There were speeches, chants, something involving ceremonial sand being poured over robotic birds. Jonah clapped when others clapped, nodded when others nodded, and tried not to look too human. Then came the oracle, a being with no visible mouth, dozens of slowly blinking eyes, and a voice that felt like déjà vu. The oracle floated above the crowd and began to chant in Old Sirali, its words forming holographic script in the air. The room fell silent. Jonah shifted uncomfortably. His translator slug vibrated once, then stopped. His skin prickled. A symbol appeared above his head, a glowing, rotating triangle with a spiral core. It matched one carved into the floor, the ceiling, and, he noticed with growing horror, the throne. Everyone stared. The oracle's voice deepened. He is the Zavantel. Jonah looked behind him, then pointed to his own chest. Me? The oracle's eyes pulsed. The one foretold, the chosen mate of the royal bloodline. There was silence. Long, painful silence. Jonah cleared his throat. Listen, I think you've got the wrong... A roar of cymbals cut him off. The crowd erupted in song. Two guards lifted him bodily and carried him toward the dais, where Sarava stared at him with the expression of someone who'd just learned her spaceship had been married off without her consent. Jonah laughed nervously. Okay, wow, this is moving fast. Can we maybe start with dinner first? Or, I don't know, a coffee? Sarava stepped forward, her voice like velvet knives. You do not look like a prophecy. Most people say that, Jonah replied. I barely look like a competent adult. The king rose, arms wide. Let the trelling begin. Jonah blinked. Trelling? Trials, Sarava said flatly, to prove you're worthy. Of what? She stared him down. Of not being incinerated by tradition. Jonah swallowed. Somewhere deep in the back of his mind, a part of him began planning a very detailed and very sarcastic complaint to the Interplanetary Diplomatic Corps. Another part wondered if Siralivex had decent coffee. The crowd cheered. The floor opened. The trials had begun. Jonah awoke in a bed made of something that pulsed. It was soft, yes, but it also responded to his movements like a concerned parent. Every time he shifted, it adjusted with an almost offended sigh. The room was round, softly lit from above by a floating orb that occasionally emitted calming murmurs in what he could only guess was lullaby Sirali. For a culture so devoted to grandiose titles and trials of worthiness, they sure knew how to design a nap-worthy panic room. The door, a hexagonal sheet of liquid metal, melted aside as two attendants entered, each wearing outfits that looked like they'd been designed during a solar flare. One carried folded garments, the other held a tray of foods that looked suspiciously like geological samples. Neither spoke, but both nodded with the solemnity of funeral planners. Good morning, Jonah offered, accepting the garments. Or is it afternoon? Or second moonrise? Sorry, still getting used to your orbital situation. The tray bearer responded with a slight bow. Nutritional intake is advised before the first trial. Hydration will increase survival odds by 19%. That's encouraging, Jonah said, eyeing a green cube that wobbled when he looked at it. What about caffeine? Forbidden, the attendant said without hesitation. Okay, so this is how I die. The garments, as it turned out, were made of some nanofiber that adjusted to his size the moment he touched it. They clung in places he would have preferred they didn't, and pulsed faintly in a way that suggested sentience. Dressed like an intergalactic fitness instructor, Jonah was led through a series of corridors that gradually widened into a stadium-like chamber, carved from obsidian stone and humming with invisible energy. On one end stood Sarava, flanked by royal advisors. On the other, the oracle floated silently, its many eyes focused entirely on Jonah. The king's voice boomed from somewhere above, though Jonah couldn't see where he was. Begin the trelling. Wait, still not 100% clear on what that means, Jonah said, but no one responded. The floor shifted, literally. It rotated beneath his feet until he stood on a platform suspended over what looked like a lake made entirely of quicksilver. From its center rose a tree, though calling it a tree felt inaccurate. It shimmered with crystalline leaves. Its branches spiraled through 4 dimensions at once, and Jonah could swear it occasionally blinked at him. This is the trial of memory, Sarava said, her voice echoing without amplification. You will place your hand on the root. The tree will see your life. If it finds you worthy, it will let you go. And if it doesn't, it will keep you. Jonah stared at the blinking tree, then at Sarava. Any chance I can bribe it with snacks? You may try, she replied, completely straight-faced. Swallowing his growing anxiety, Jonah stepped forward and placed his hand on a root that rose to meet him. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he was pulled inward, not physically but mentally, into a swirling torrent of memories, thoughts, embarrassments, and that one dream he had in college involving a talking toaster and a failed audition. His life replayed itself, his childhood on Earth, complete with overly enthusiastic birthday clowns, his time at the academy, where he'd accidentally launched a professor's hover car into orbit, his first assignment to a trading outpost that turned out to be an active volcano, all of it, including the moment he first saw Sarava standing in the reception chamber like an armored goddess judging a pet contest. When he returned to himself, the platform was silent. The tree had retracted, pulsing slowly with a soft golden glow. "It has accepted you," the oracle intoned. "Great," Jonah said, legs trembling. "Do I get a sticker, or—" The floor spun again. He landed in a different chamber. This one smaller, intimate, and oddly comfortable, as though built by someone trying to imitate human lounges using only third-hand descriptions and mild vertigo. Sarava stood there, arms crossed, gaze unreadable. "Why do you keep making jokes?" she asked. "Habit, anxiety, a desperate need for approval. Pick one." "This is serious." "I noticed. There was a tree that tried to psychoanalyze me using metaphysical branches." She walked closer. Her armor today was less ceremonial and more practical. Sleek, matte, and clearly capable of stopping things more dangerous than awkward questions. Her hair was tied back, exposing the full arc of her ears. Jonah realized with a jolt that she was beautiful. Not in the fragile, delicate way of hollow stars, but in the way of someone who could build or break civilizations with the same level of effort. "Do you think this is a game?" she asked. "I think this is a wedding I wasn't invited to, a prophecy I don't believe in, and a culture I've offended at least 7 times this morning. So no, I don't think it's a game." She studied him. "Then you understand what's at stake." "Sort of. Half. Maybe a third. I'm still fuzzy on whether your people believe in metaphors or if everything really does explode." A flicker of something passed her face. It might have been amusement or indigestion. "The next trial will test your loyalty." "Already loyal to the idea of not dying. Does that count?" She didn't answer. Instead, she handed him a small device. It looked like a marble but pulsed like a heartbeat. "Place this in your ear. Should I ask why or just roll with it? It links your thoughts to mine, temporarily, during the trial." Jonah stared. "So, psychic walkie-talkies." "Yes." "Great. Hope you enjoy the inner monologue of a panicking bureaucrat." She didn't smile, but she didn't frown either. As the device activated, a sudden whisper slid through his mind. Not words exactly, more like feelings wrapped in silence. She was there, just beyond the surface of his thoughts, curious, guarded, sharp as the edge of a broken promise. He whispered back, mostly for his own sanity. "This is very intimate for a first date." There was no reply, but something about the connection told him she'd heard, and somewhere, under all the ceremony and armor, she might have almost smiled. Almost. The second trial took place in a forest that wasn't a forest. Jonah stood at the edge of what looked like a dense jungle, composed entirely of metallic flora. Trees clicked and shifted, leaves unfolded like solar panels, and the air was thick with the scent of ozone and unspoken legal liabilities. Somewhere above, artificial clouds shimmered with encoded patterns, raining data instead of water. It was less a wilderness and more a computer's fever dream of nature. Beside him, a small drone hovered with the persistent buzz of something underpaid and overconfident. "Welcome, Zeventel," it chirped in a voice that sounded like someone had taught sarcasm to a jellyfish. "This is the trial of loyalty. Your task is simple. Retrieve the heart fruit from the core grove and return it without compromise." "Sounds straightforward," Jonah said. "Where's the catch?" The drone paused, rotated 360 degrees for no reason, then replied, "Everything is trying to kill you." Ah, classic A map appeared in the air before him. A pulsing 3D rendering of the forest's internal architecture, complete with danger zones helpfully labeled with skulls, fire, and the phrase, "definitely not a shortcut." Jonah squinted at it, then turned his attention to the soft presence in his mind. The telepathic link with Sarava was still active, quiet but unmistakable, like a loaded crossbow wrapped in silk. "You getting this?" he thought. "Yes," came the response, cool and dry as shadowed marble. "Don't go left at the split. Because of danger? Because it smells like regret, and is statistically haunted. With that, Jonah stepped into the grove. The first few minutes were manageable. The plants rustled gently, retracted when touched, and only occasionally hissed in binary. But then came the flinch roots, vines that responded to fear. The more he worried, the tighter they coiled. Jonah froze mid-step, trying not to think about his tax backlog, his fear of flying cows, or that time he accidentally kissed the wrong diplomat's spouse. Breathe through your elbows, Sarava advised. That's not a human thing. Unfortunate species design. By sheer luck or stubbornly average reflexes, Jonah bypassed the flinch roots by pretending he was on a date with someone who hated fun. The vines, disappointed, slithered back. Further in, the terrain shifted. The ground was soft and uneven, whispering rumors through his boots. At one point, a flower tried to read his future. It screamed and wilted. Eventually, he reached a clearing with a tree unlike the others. It pulsed a deep crimson, surrounded by a ring of floating stones that rotated in lazy defiance of gravity. Hanging from one of its lower branches was the heart fruit, glowing faintly, shaped like a perfect teardrop or an unusually smug apple. He stepped forward. "Stop!" came a voice. Jonah froze. From the trees emerged three figures, humanoid, tall with long ears and armor etched in golden script. Their expressions were unreadable in the way that suggested they had strong opinions about etiquette and weak opinions about mercy. "You are not of the blood," one said. "Technically I am now," Jonah offered. "I'm prophesied. Got the matching neural bond and everything. It's very official." "You do not belong," another hissed. "I hear that a lot," Jonah said, then sighed. "Look, I'm not here to mess with your sacred grove or, colonize anything. I just need that fruit. It's for a trial, which, by the way, is turning out to be less about loyalty and more about not dying tragically." The third figure stepped forward. "To take the heart fruit, you must prove loyalty by sacrifice." Jonah frowned. "Sacrifice?" A second heart fruit dropped from the tree, landing near him. The figures stepped back. A test. One was real, one was false. Choosing wrongly might result in explosions, curses, or an inconveniently dramatic musical number. He reached inward, searching the neural bond. "Do you know which is real?" "I do," Sarava replied, her mental voice a low hum of certainty. "But I will not tell you. Seriously? You must choose. What if I fail? Then you were never loyal to begin with." He sighed. Loyalty was never about certainty. It was about risk, faith, trusting that someone had your back, even if you couldn't see it. He closed his eyes, reached out, and chose the fruit that smelled least like existential dread. The figures vanished. Jonah blinked, heart pounding, holding the fruit in both hands. No explosion, no curse, just a soft chime and a subtle vibration through the trees. "You chose correctly," the drone said, reappearing beside him. "Congratulations. Your odds of survival have increased by 12%. That's still not good. It's an improvement." On the way back, the forest seemed to part for him. No more vines, no more whispered threats, just an eerie silence and the distant, muffled sound of someone misplaying an alien trumpet. As he emerged from the grove, Sarava stood waiting. Her gaze dropped to the fruit, then met his. "You didn't ask for help," she said. "I wanted to," Jonah admitted, "but it didn't feel right. Loyalty's not supposed to be easy, is it?" She nodded slowly. "Number it never is." There was a pause, then she added, "Also, the fruit is mildly explosive if dropped, so good job not doing that." Jonah blinked. "You led with the psychic riddles but skipped the part where it could detonate? You seem confident. I tripped 6 times. And yet you survived." He handed her the fruit. She accepted it with both hands, her fingers brushing his. For a brief moment, something passed between them, not through the neural bond, but the old-fashioned way. A look, a beat of shared silence. The king's voice returned, amplified and sonorous. "The Zeventel has completed the second trial." "2 down," Jonah muttered. "How many are there?" 7, Sarava said. Jonah looked up at the clouds. "I really should have just sent a hologram." The fourth trial was held in a city that did not technically exist, at least not in the traditional, grounded in physics sense. It shimmered in and out of phase with the surrounding landscape, a construct of pure energy, layered memory, and whatever dreams artificial intelligences had when they overclocked themselves. Jonah was told its name, Velsorin, but promptly forgot it, as it was pronounced using a sound only replicable by creatures with three tongues and a deep understanding of particle entanglement. He stood at its threshold, staring at towers that bent sideways without falling, bridges that led to nowhere and then changed their minds halfway, and roadways that sang softly when stepped on. The guide, a cylindrical being with 9 arms and an unhealthy fascination with tax codes, handed Jonah a small black disc. "This is your task disc," it explained. "In the trial of insight, you must complete a series of bureaucratic maneuvers within Velsorin's legal structure." Jonah stared. "Bureaucracy? That's the trial?" "It is the most sacred tradition of our people," the guide said solemnly. "You must obtain a permit for the bonding ceremony. Without it, the union is invalid. This process may involve negotiations, ethical logic puzzles, and standing in line. Much line." Jonah glanced at Sarava, who stood silently just beyond the archway, observing him with that unnerving serenity of someone watching a kitten approach a treadmill. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked through the link. "No," she replied. "This is how we filter out the impatient, the brash, and the truly unworthy. Only the clever and persistent succeed. So basically, it's a DMV from another dimension." "Correct." With a sigh, Jonah stepped into the city. Instantly, reality adjusted. Gravity rewrote itself into a suggestion. Colors blurred into emotional states, and several buildings attempted to greet him. One offered him a cookie. Another tried to sell him philosophical insurance. The task disc lit up, projecting a glowing arrow into the air. "Follow the path to the Registry of Conjugal Harmonization," it chirped. "Is there a registry of existential dread?" Jonah muttered. "Yes," the disc replied cheerfully. "It's 2 doors down." The first line he encountered was 27 beings long and included a creature made entirely of translucent nerves, a woman with eyes like shifting galaxies, and a sentient fog that only spoke in riddles and Yelp reviews. It took 2 hours to move 4 spaces, mostly because the being at the front kept trying to bribe the clerk with compressed starlight. Jonah passed the time by humming Earth tunes and playing mental ping-pong with Sarava, who, to her credit, stayed linked in. "Didn't expect a legal labyrinth," he sent. "Insight isn't about solving puzzles. It's about how you solve them. Your instincts, your adaptability. Also, your ability to not strangle someone while holding a clipboard." "Indeed." At last he reached the front. "I need a Form Tive 117B, he said with forced confidence. The clerk, a levitating cube with one very tired eye, blinked. "Do you have your identification crystal?" Jonah frowned. "No, but I have this disc." "That's a suggestion tool. I need identity verification." Jonah paused. "Does sarcasm count?" "No." After 5 detours, a psychometric evaluation, and accidentally joining a short-lived political protest, he found himself seated before the overseer of harmony, a being too large to fit in the room, and thus present only as a shimmering outline in the ceiling. "State your intention," it boomed. "To file for union approval with Princess Sarava of House Altar," Jonah said, voice steady. "Are you aware of the psychological strain such a bond entails? The risk of cultural dissonance, spiritual fusion, and in-laws who can read your bloodstream?" "I'm from Earth," Jonah replied. "I've had Thanksgiving with Aunt Rhonda. I'm prepared." The overseer was silent for a moment. Then, "Your wit has been logged. Proceed to the test of shared truths." A new chamber unfolded. Sarava entered with him this time. They stood in a translucent sphere suspended in light. A console hovered between them. "The trial of insight requires one truth from each of us," she said quietly. "Nothing superficial. Something real. Something painful." Jonah hesitated. "What happens if we lie?" "We're ejected, and the bond is dissolved." He inhaled, then touched the console. "I used to pretend I was important," he said. "Back home, I'd tell people I worked for galactic relations. But I was just a logistics coordinator, moving containers, ordering replacement bolts, And I'd tell myself it mattered, that I mattered. The console pulsed. Accepted. Sarava stepped forward. I was meant to lead a war, she said, not a marriage. I was trained to rule, to conquer, to bend enemies until they broke. The idea of loving someone I did not choose, it terrified me. The sphere faded. The console chimed. You have passed. Back outside, they stood in silence for a long moment. You're not what I expected, she said. Neither are you, he replied. She nodded toward the city behind them. You handled Velsoren better than most. I'm still seeing colors that haven't been invented yet. Those will fade. Do I get a certificate? Number. But you're allowed to keep the disc. It beeped in his pocket, having quietly downloaded over 600 bureaucratic procedures for his future enjoyment. He decided to throw it into the nearest black hole as soon as possible. They walked back toward the palace in companionable silence, the link between them pulsing softly, not just with thoughts, but with something newer, thinner than trust, warmer than expectation. Maybe the next trial would kill him, but for now he was still walking. The final trial was held in the Hall of Echoes, a place carved from the bones of extinct stars and stitched together with the memory of forgotten gods. Jonah stood at the center of the chamber, surrounded by walls that flickered with images of his past, present, and potential future. The air buzzed with quantum tension, the kind that made your skin itch and your regrets start a barbershop quartet in the back of your mind. A voice, not entirely separate from the room itself, boomed down. You stand before the final gate, the trial of the self. To complete the rite, you must confront the one who knows you best. Jonah frowned. My mother? A shimmer in the air produced his opponent. It was him, or rather, a version of him. Taller, smugger, with better hair and the kind of posture that suggested he paid off his student loans and flossed daily. Ah, Jonah muttered. Of course, evil me. Classic finale. Not evil, the doppelganger replied. Just optimized. What are you? My potential if I made every smart decision? More or less. Do you have a yacht? Several. Jonah sighed. I hate you already. The trial of the self, Saraba had explained, was a confrontation not of fists or blades, but of perspective. One had to stand against their perfected self and prove they were worthy of the path they had walked, not because it was ideal, but because it was true. They sparred in words. Optimized, Jonah questioned every mistake Jonah had made, every failure to act, every embarrassing stumble, like the time he accidentally mailed a resignation letter instead of a quarterly report. The way he panicked during the forest trial, how he still second-guessed the feeling that had grown, quiet and warm, for Sarava. You're not ready to be royal consort, Perfect Jonah said. You're a misplaced logistics officer who eats cereal with a fork because he forgets to buy spoons. That was once, Jonah snapped, and I was very tired. You think a joke can hide your inadequacies? No, Jonah said, but it can remind me not to take myself so seriously that I forget I'm human. And being human, with all our awkwardness and shortcomings, is why I've made it this far. The hall vibrated. Perfect Jonah hesitated. His smirk faltered. I'm not flawless, Jonah continued. I'm not polished or impressive or particularly coordinated, but I'm honest. I'm loyal, and I love her. The final word echoed like a dropped pebble in an endless canyon. The double vanished, leaving Jonah alone. A moment later, the room transformed into the Royal Amphitheater. He hadn't walked there. Reality had simply decided he was done. The audience was already gathered. Delegates from a dozen star systems, tall alien dignitaries with fronds for faces, and one guy with 7 eyebrows and a loud shirt. The king stood beneath the spire of a cord, his voice projecting with gravity that bent sentences. The human, Jonah Rix, has completed all trials. He stands before us as the Zeven Tel, the chosen mate of House Eltar. Jonah glanced at Sarava. She stood radiant in ceremonial armor that made her look like the front cover of an ancient prophecy, and also someone who could kill you with her thoughts, which technically she could. You may speak, the king said. Jonah stepped forward, cleared his throat, forgot every word he'd planned, said instead, Look, I know I'm not what anyone expected. I didn't grow up in royal courts. I once called a warp ambassador bro. I don't know how to sword fight or hover in midair or negotiate with sentient fire. The crowd blinked in unified confusion. But I know how to listen. I know how to try. And I know what it's like to feel ordinary in a place full of legends. Sarava, princess, your world is vast and impossible, and I can't promise to fit into it perfectly, but I can promise to be there. Fully, honestly. Even when I mess up. Especially then. Silence, then laughter. It started with the king, surprisingly deep and resonant, and soon spread through the amphitheater. Not mocking, joyful, genuine. That, the king declared, is the first honest speech we've heard from a suitor in 3 centuries. Sarava approached, her eyes unreadable, her presence a controlled storm. She said nothing at first, just looked at him, long and deep and unnervingly quiet. Then she took his hand. I choose him, she said. I would rather spend a life tangled in imperfection than an eternity with someone who fears being flawed. The crowd erupted, not in the wild cheering of Earth sports arenas, but in the subtle, rhythmic chime of approval customary to her people. A musical gesture of consent, of union, of beginning. Later, after the ceremony, after the 6-hour feast and the entirely too intimate dance with a jelly-based dignitary from Tharn 5, Jonah and Sarava stood on the balcony of their new quarters. The stars spun slowly above, distant but familiar now. Do I get a title? He asked. Consort Pilgrim of the Fifth Accord, she said. That sounds like a ship. It's a diplomatic rank. Also a ship. We're retrofitting it for your travels. I get a spaceship? You pass the bureaucracy trial. They stood together in the quiet, linked minds, sharing thoughts like threads in a tapestry. You've changed, she said. You have too, he replied. Perhaps. But I think I was only waiting for the change to begin. He wrapped an arm around her waist, still a little stunned by the journey that had led him here. From Earth's dull corridors to this place of strange stars and stranger customs. From obscurity to something like love. I guess this is where the story ends, he said. No, Sarava murmured. This is where it begins. The air shimmered with residual heat from the crash, curling above twisted metal and cracked panels like ghost fingers reaching for a sky that wasn't interested. Smoke crawled from the ruins of the downed scout vessel, black ribbons unraveling against the pale burn of 2 moons overhead. At the center of it all stood a man with his hands in his pockets and a crooked grin on his lips, blinking casually at the 6-foot alien warrior, aiming a humming blade directly at his throat. Do I get a last request? Marcus asked, shifting his weight like this was a casual conversation and not the literal pointy end of a death sentence. The alien woman stared at him, not blinking. Her ears, long, angular, elegant in the same way cliffs are elegant before you fall off them, twitched once. Her grip on the blade didn't waver. She was silent, assessing, and something about her posture said she'd killed things before. Lots of things. Probably before breakfast. Her armor was a matte gray that changed tone with every step she'd taken through the wreckage, and her face was too calm for anyone with a murder knife that close to a neck vein. You've already used your last request, she said flatly. You requested not to be incinerated. Well, I didn't actually say that. I just ran in the opposite direction of the explosion. That's universal body language for, I'd rather not be turned into barbecue. Her expression didn't change. He tilted his head. You've got a great poker face. Ever consider high-stakes cards instead of, executions? The blade pressed a fraction closer. A faint sizzle tickled his skin. He sniffed. Is that cinnamon? Your sword smells like cinnamon. That's a really weird thing for a death weapon to smell like. You assassinate people and then leave them hungry? She said nothing, but her ears twitched again, and Marcus had the strangest sense she was trying not to react. I'm Marcus, he offered. Marcus Wynn, freelancer, sometime engineer, collector of bad ideas. You? A pause, then, Veathar. Vea, he repeated. Cool name. Kinda sounds like something you whisper before unleashing an ancient curse. Still nothing. This would be the part where you ask me what I'm doing here. he added, waving vaguely at the broken landscape of scorched rocks and crumpled alloy. But I'm guessing the whole strolling through a restricted quadrant during a skirmish thing kinda answers itself. Vea didn't lower the blade, but her eyes narrowed slightly. They were a molten shade of copper, burning faintly in the dusky light. He wondered briefly if they glowed in the dark. That would be unfair. She finally spoke. You should not be alive. He nodded. Yeah, that's a popular opinion today. I think the exploding sky cruiser agrees with you. I should kill you. You've had like a full 2 minutes to do that. Something tells me you're not as sure about it as you want to be. She stepped closer. The blade's edge hummed louder. You are not afraid. Oh, I am. I'm just really good at multitasking. Right now I'm terrified and also wondering if your species invented eyeliner because yours is on point. Something flickered in her expression. Not quite a smile. Definitely not a snarl. A third thing. Unnamed. Behind them something sparked in the remains of the ship. A hiss of gas. A flicker of dying power. Marcus flinched, and the blade moved with him, but didn't cut. She was precise. He admired that, in a gallows humor kind of way. What were you doing on this vessel? She asked. Fixing it. Sort of. Trying to reroute an energy core with a broken spanner and half a sandwich. The sandwich was less helpful than I'd hoped. Her head tilted a degree. Why? Because someone was paying me. And because curiosity is a disease I haven't been able to cure with coffee or duct tape. She considered this. You are not military. Nope. I'm allergic to marching and people shouting at me in unison. Then why are you here in a war zone? Because someone decided the best place to test experimental propulsion was right over your people's territory, he paused, which looking back might have been a bit, oops. She stared at him. You are flippant. I've been told worse. She withdrew the blade an inch, just an inch, enough to let him breathe easier, but not enough to make him think he could run. Not that he was planning to. Not yet. Give me one reason I shouldn't end this now, she said quietly. He met her eyes and, for once, didn't smile. Because you already hesitated, and I think that bothers you more than you want to admit. Silence stretched between them like a wire. Then he added, also, if you kill me now, you'll never know where I hid the data core. Her ears twitched sharply. He grinned. Ah, got your attention. Vea stepped back, blade still humming, but no longer poised to strike. Her gaze didn't leave his. You are very lucky. Depends on your definition of lucky. I'm sweaty, slightly concussed, and I think I inhaled a microbe that wants to date my lungs. She blinked slowly. He sighed. That was a joke. I know. Another beat. Then she gestured with her blade toward the ridge. You will come with me. Oh, good, a field trip. Do I get a souvenir? If you survive. He followed, brushing dust from his jacket and muttering. They never say that part on the brochures. They walked in silence for a while, boots crunching over cracked ground, shadows stretching long in the waning light. Marcus eyed her from the corner of his vision. She moved like someone born to war, but there was a stiffness to her now, something not quite as steady as before. Hey, he said eventually, you ever think maybe this whole conquer and kill vibe your people have is just a phase? Like interstellar adolescence? She didn't answer. You didn't kill me. That says something. I may still. Sure. But you didn't. Yet. And now you've got me wondering if that's the start of a very weird friendship or the middle of a slow-motion execution. Vea's voice was low. You talk too much. You stab too little. That earned him a glance. Not warm exactly, but not icy either. Measured. As the two figures disappeared beyond the ridge, a distant drone buzzed to life in the ruins behind them. Sensors blinked red. A signal was sent. Someone, somewhere, had noticed the deviation in the warrior's mission path. Marcus, meanwhile, was still talking. And I'm just saying, if your people ever want to workshop names for your blades, the Cinnamon Doom is right there. The salt plains stretched like the bones of a forgotten god, flat and blinding and utterly indifferent. The heat danced in wavering sheets over the cracked terrain, and the horizon refused to move no matter how far they walked. Marcus had been quiet for almost 7 full minutes, an impressive personal record. But it broke when he tripped over a petrified something and muttered, "Pretty sure my kneecap just made first contact." Vea didn't turn around. He picked himself up, dusted off his trousers, and jogged a few steps to catch up. "Do all your missions involve this much walking? I'm starting to feel like I joined a silent meditation cult that forgot to include water breaks." Still, she said nothing. "I mean, you could carry me. Not forever. Just, through the parts where my legs want to resign." Her voice when it came was dry. "Your legs are not under duress. Your lungs, however, are loud. See? That was almost a joke. We're making progress." She adjusted the strap across her shoulder. The curved hilt of her blade bounced against her side with each step. Marcus watched her walk, noting the imperceptible limp she was trying very hard not to have. Her right leg favored slightly, probably from the crash. He also noted the way her eyes flicked to every shadow, every dip in the terrain, every spark of movement in the air. Programmed vigilance, the kind that didn't sleep even when she did. "You're injured," he said. "Observation is not intelligence. Well, neither is walking half dead through a war zone with a guy who makes bad puns and smells like engine coolant." She glanced at him, just briefly. "Was that another joke?" he asked. "No," she said. "That was a warning." He smiled, wiping sweat from his brow. "I'll take it as flirtation." They crested a low ridge, revealing the remains of what had once been a drop capsule, a sleek, semi-buried spear of metal, now twisted from impact. Vea approached it without hesitation, pressing her palm against a panel. The hull shimmered and split open with a hiss of released pressure, revealing a cache of supplies and a long, flat container that glowed softly with contained energy. Marcus peered over her shoulder. "What's in the glowing suitcase? Snacks? A really dramatic flashlight?" She ignored him, withdrawing a vial of liquid and injecting it into her side without flinching. The device sealed with a small hiss, and she exhaled, the tension in her shoulders loosening just enough for him to notice. "Ah, space juice," he said. "So much more efficient than aspirin." She secured the container, slung it across her back, and turned to him. "You're carrying the relay module." "The what now?" She tossed him a rectangular device roughly the size of a shoebox, which he caught with a grunt. "Careful," she said. "It's pressurized. If you drop it, we'll both disintegrate." Marcus froze. "Seriously?" "No." "Oh, thank God. Wait, are you lying?" "Yes." He blinked. "Okay, not helping." They resumed walking. The salt plains began to crack and peel, giving way to patches of obsidian-like stone, the kind that hummed faintly if you stood still long enough. The relics of some long-dead impact event, maybe. Or maybe just the planet's way of saying, "Don't get comfortable." After an hour, Marcus finally asked what had been burning at the edge of his thoughts. "Why didn't you kill me?" Vea didn't break stride. "I didn't need to." "That's a very non-answer." "I am under no obligation to answer." "Fair, but we're kind of past the stranger danger stage, don't you think?" She was silent for a while, then, "You smiled. When I was going to kill you." He shrugged. "Didn't want to die scowling. My mother always said, you never know when your face might freeze that way." "That was not fear. It was, something else. I figured if I was going to go out, I might as well confuse the hell out of my killer, keep you guessing." "Is that your strategy for survival? Chaos?" Sometimes I use baked goods. Depends on the species." She stopped suddenly. Her hand shot out, pressing against his chest to halt him. In the distance, a flicker of movement disturbed the hot air, a shimmer that didn't belong. She squinted into it, fingers brushing the hilt of her blade. Marcus lowered his voice. "Let me guess, not local wildlife. Drones? Surface scouts? From my command." He frowned. "Shouldn't they be coming to pick you up? They think I am compromised. Because of me. Because I deviated from protocol. Because I hesitated. Well, maybe if your protocol wasn't stab first, ask never, we wouldn't be in this mess." She looked at him, unreadable. "Stay here." He opened his mouth, closed it, then said, "You realize I'm the least stealthy thing on this planet, right? I once got caught sneaking into a library, but she was already gone. disappearing into a shimmer of heat and armor, her steps silent. Marcus sighed, crouched behind a jagged rock, and pulled out a small device from his pocket, a makeshift scanner he'd rigged from broken ship parts and caffeine desperation. He flicked it on. Within minutes, the scanner pinged. Vea was back, blood on her knuckles, two inactive drones slung over her shoulder. Marcus stood. So, did you try diplomacy? Diplomacy failed. He stared at the wrecked drones. So did they. She dropped them at his feet. We keep moving. They won't be the last. They resumed their path, now walking faster. The suns dipped lower, casting twin shadows that seemed to follow just a little too closely. The tension returned, coiling tight in the air, but Marcus refused to let it have the final word. You know, he said, if we get out of this alive, I think we should go into business together. She didn't respond. I'm serious. You do the stabbing, I do the talking. We'd be unstoppable. Maybe a podcast. Plasma and sass. Still silence. He nodded. Okay, I'll workshop it. A faint smile ghosted across her face, so quick he almost missed it. Behind them, far beyond the ridge, a signal pulsed in the wreckage of the ship. A red light blinked 3 times, then stayed on. Marcus had seen some truly questionable structures in his time. Cargo stations held together with duct tape and optimism, asteroid bars with gravity so inconsistent you could gain muscle mass just by drinking. But this particular bunker took the prize. Half buried in the dark crust of the basin, it looked like a rock had given up trying to be anything but ugly. Wires trailed from the top like abandoned party streamers, and the access panel had the gall to blink at them as if it was considering whether to even bother unlocking. This the place? Marcus asked, shifting the relay module on his back. Because I have to say, it's not exactly screaming safe house to me, more like unsupervised tetanus adventure. Vea knelt at the panel, hands moving with practiced ease. It's off-grid. That's the point. Sure, but have you considered hiding in something less murdery, like a bakery, or a planet with breathable air and a beach? The door opened with a hydraulic sigh, and Vea stepped inside without comment. Marcus followed, muttering about sand and vacation packages. The interior was cramped and dim, lit only by strips of blue plasma light running along the floor and ceiling. Dust floated in the stale air, occasionally disturbed by unseen vents trying valiantly to keep things breathable. So what is this place? And he asked. Old recon outpost, decommissioned after the war with the Pernaxi. Marcus squinted at a wall-mounted interface. You mean the war where both sides accidentally signed peace treaties with different factions and spent 3 months fighting over a translation error? Yes, he grinned. I love that one. Classic intergalactic misunderstanding. Reminds me of my last date. She turned to him slowly. You're comparing diplomatic catastrophe to dating? Listen, both involve cryptic signals, potential explosions, and trying not to die by the end. It's basically the same thing. Vea rolled her eyes, subtly, but enough for him to declare it a victory. She moved to a terminal, fingers dancing across the keys as the screen flickered to life. Marcus wandered the perimeter, poking at crates, flipping open supply lids, and discovering a container of something that might have once been food, but now looked like dried moss wearing regret. He sat on a bench chewing on a protein bar that tasted like betrayal. So, while you do your secret alien spy stuff, what am I supposed to do? Inventory the expired jerky? You're not supposed to be here, she said, eyes locked on the screen. Technically true, but that's been the case since I was born. She didn't laugh, but her shoulders moved ever so slightly. He decided it counted. Vea pulled up a map of the sector, a red marker blinking steadily in the southeast quadrant. There, she said, transmission relay. If we get there and upload the data core, command might stand down. Marcus leaned over her shoulder. And by might, you mean absolutely won't, but it'll be fun trying? She hesitated. It's our best chance. Well then, he patted the bench. Let's give best chance a fighting shot. Before she could reply, the lights flickered. Marcus looked up. Was that normal? No. She moved instantly, blade out, scanning the room. Stay behind me. Gladly, he said, slipping the protein bar back into its wrapper like it might betray them. The door behind them hissed open, and in stepped something that should not have fit through the doorway. A security droid, maybe, once upon a time. Now half its plating was scorched, and its left leg dragged a clawed gouge behind it. Its voice box crackled. Unauthorized access. Terminate. Terminate. Marcus raised a hand. Hi there. Just a quick note. Technically, I'm always unauthorized. The droid raised its weapon arm. Vea moved faster than physics had any right to allow. In one smooth motion, she ducked beneath the initial shot, pivoted, and slammed her blade into the droid's torso. Sparks exploded, but it kept moving. Marcus ducked behind a crate and began pulling wires from the floor panel. Just buying time with mild electrocution, he muttered. No pressure. The droid swiveled toward him. Vea shouted, Don't let it lock on. Great tip, General. Got anything more specific? Like a flamethrower? Or an off switch labeled, Please stop murdering? The droid fired again. A blast scorched the crate above Marcus's head. He ripped the last wire from the floor and jammed it into the exposed wall socket, praying to every minor space deity he didn't believe in. There was a pop, then a flash. The droid convulsed once, hard, then fell, the light in its optical core flickering out with a disappointed whine. Marcus peeked out. Did I just win a boss fight with an electrical short and blind panic? Vea sheathed her blade, stepping over the now smoking remains. Improvised success is still success. He nodded. Remind me to put that on my resume. Under skills, I'll add, almost died, but didn't. They spent the next few minutes checking the systems. Vea moved with efficient speed, scanning for additional threats, while Marcus helped by periodically asking questions she mostly ignored. Finally, the terminal beeped, indicating a system reset. Vea backed away. We move at sunrise, she said. I need rest. You should too. Marcus flopped onto the bench. Great. I'll just drift off to sleep with the comforting memory of nearly being vaporized. Vea turned toward a corner alcove where a cot had been folded into the wall. She paused. Why do you joke so much? He considered. Because if I don't laugh, I might scream. And if I scream, you'll probably stab me again. She didn't argue. Instead, she lay down on the cot, one hand resting on her blade's hilt. Marcus stared at the ceiling. You think they'll come after us? More drones, maybe a drop team? Yes. And you think we'll make it? Silence. Then, I think you'll keep talking until something kills you. He smiled in the dark. Probably. But hey, at least I'll die interesting. A faint chuckle, dry and almost reluctant, echoed across the room before sleep claimed them both. The sunrise on Galarix 9 was a lie. It wasn't the warm, hopeful glow of Earth's dawns, but more like someone behind the sky switched on an ultraviolet floodlight and muttered, Good enough. The terrain outside the bunker shimmered under a thin mist, the kind of fog that wasn't quite natural and smelled vaguely like melted coins. Marcus squinted up at the sky as they stepped outside. Do you think the sun here hates us personally, or is it just socially awkward? Vea tapped a sensor on her gauntlet and scanned the path ahead. The radiation levels are within tolerable limits. Tolerable is such a flexible word, Marcus muttered, like edible or emotionally stable. They moved quickly, weaving through the jagged outcroppings and the cracked mineral plates that made the landscape look like someone had dropped a mirror and never cleaned it up. Vea led with unwavering precision, checking her readings every 100 paces. Marcus followed, slightly out of breath and profoundly regretting every pastry he'd ever eaten. You know, he huffed, adjusting the strap on his pack, for someone trained in infiltration and blade combat, you walk like a military parade. Vea didn't break stride. If I walked like you, I'd be dead. I walk like someone preserving energy for emergencies. You walk like someone who's never had an emergency. He grinned. You wound me. Not yet. The relay station shimmered into view atop a rise. It was less of a station and more of a glorified pylon, embedded into the rock and sprouting a dish array that looked like it had been salvaged from a forgotten sci-fi convention. Several blinking lights confirmed it was still operational. Unfortunately, the two sleek scout crafts parked nearby suggested they were not alone. Marcus froze. Okay, let's play a game. It's called Are Those Friendly? Spoiler, they never are. Vea crouched behind a ridge and peered through a monocular. Mercenaries, Cyrix models. Look at the armor. Repurposed exosuits, light pulse rifles, short-range comm arrays, hired muscle, not military. Marcus peeked over the ridge and immediately ducked back down. I saw one of them pick their nose through their visor. Not sure if that makes them less threatening or more. We go around, west flank. There's cover. Or, Marcus said slowly, we create a distraction. One that doesn't involve me being shot, ideally. Vea turned to him. You have a plan? Loosely. You ever heard of a plasma compression capsule? Her eyes narrowed. They're illegal. Which is why it's fortunate I found one on a transport I was inspecting. That's called stealing. It's called aggressively redistributing resources. He dug into his pack and produced a capsule the size of a grapefruit, humming softly with unstable energy. Vea blinked at it. That could take out the whole ridge. Exactly why we throw it far away and run the other direction? She considered him. It's not the worst plan you've had. Don't sound so encouraging. I might get used to it. Marcus twisted the ignition ring and lobbed the capsule across the plane with the flair of a man who once lost a bet and had to MC a wedding on zero gravity. The capsule landed with a dull thud, rolled once, then began glowing ominously. Time to go, he hissed, grabbing Vea's arm. They sprinted around the ridge, ducking behind outcroppings as the mercenaries turned toward the hum. One of them approached it cautiously, gun raised. Marcus whispered, "Any second now." The capsule released a high-pitched screech, and then a concussive pulse exploded outward in a blinding flash of blue-white light. The ground shook. The dish wobbled. A distant scream echoed, part confusion, part singed eyebrows. Marcus grinned. That felt good. 3 hostiles disabled. Vea confirmed, checking her readouts. 2 more regrouping. Let's move. They darted from cover to cover, making their way to the base of the relay. Vea tapped into the panel and began uploading the data core. Marcus kept watch, peeking through the cracks in the old alloy wall. So when this is all over, what happens to me? You're a civilian who interfered with a classified operation. I prefer consultant with excellent timing. I might recommend amnesty, if we survive. That's the nicest threat I've ever received. The console beeped. Upload complete. Now we leave, Vea said. Marcus hesitated. That easy? No. The ridge behind them erupted in gunfire. Plasma bolts whizzed past, scorching the ground. Marcus ducked. You jinxed us! That was definitely a jinx moment. Vea drew her blade and deflected a bolt midair. Down the ridge, there's a canyon. Move! They ran. Marcus nearly tripped twice, cursing his boots and gravity and every bad decision that led to this. They hit the canyon mouth, and Vea stopped suddenly, pressing a hand to her ear. Transmission intercepted. There's another squad incoming. Marcus gasped. How big a squad? Big. Define big. Like uncomfortable birthday party big? Or entire wedding on fire big? She looked at him. You're really not good at fear, are you? I'm great at fear. I just process it loudly. They moved deeper into the canyon, the path narrowing, walls climbing on both sides. Vea examined the stone, then pressed a hidden panel. A section of the wall shimmered and vanished, revealing a tunnel barely wide enough for them. Marcus stared. Okay, that's cool. They slipped inside as footsteps thundered above them. In the safety of the tunnel, Marcus exhaled. So what now? We keep running? Or are you going to tell me this ends with a hot bath and emotional closure? Vea kept moving. We rendezvous at Site Echo. It's deep enough that their scanners can't track us. Then we wait for command. Marcus followed. I can't wait to see what the interior design's like. Let me guess, more rocks? A silence stretched between them, but it wasn't the cold, tactical silence of survival anymore. It was something looser, familiar. You know, Marcus said, you're pretty good company for someone who once tried to stab me. You're tolerable for someone who talks too much. He grinned. Progress. Their footsteps echoed through the tunnel as the light from the surface faded behind them. They emerged from the tunnel into a cavern that looked like a cathedral built by rocks that never quite finished deciding if they were stalagmites or artistic statements. Light hummed from bioluminescent veins in the walls, casting soft blues and greens across Vea's face as she scanned the chamber. The silence was thick, but not heavy, like the planet was holding its breath and had gotten distracted halfway through. Marcus stumbled in behind her, blinking. "If this is the afterlife, I'd like to speak to management. I ordered clouds and maybe a harp." Vea didn't smile, but her tone softened. "This is Site Echo." "Echo, huh?" He clapped his hands and listened to the sound bounce back. "Oh yeah, creepy and accurate. Nice branding." They made their way to the central terminal, a floating disk of holographic interfaces nested in a ring of ancient tech and alien inscriptions. Vea activated it with a gesture, and the display flared to life, pulsing data streams flickering around them like a choir of digital ghosts. Marcus leaned in, eyes darting between scrolling readouts. "So this is it? The evidence? Proof the consortium's been using Galarix 9 for illegal tech trials?" Vea nodded. "Biological weapon tests, cloaking frequency experiments, temporal phase distortion, most of it banned under the Vega Accords. And this is going to stop them? If we survive long enough to transmit it." Marcus folded his arms. "So, standard heroic suicide odds?" "I calculate a 32% chance of success." He nodded. "See, you keep getting more optimistic the longer we hang out." They began the upload, fingers flying over panels and glyphs. The cavern pulsed brighter with each passing second as the signal climbed toward the upper atmosphere. But somewhere behind them, a low tremor rolled through the stone. Vea turned. "They've found us." Marcus sighed. "Of course they have. Do you think we've earned a dramatic last stand yet?" "No," she said, pulling a small device from her belt. "Because I have a teleshifter." "You've had a teleshifter this whole time?" "It's not a luxury model." He looked at the half-melted duct-taped thing in her hand. "It looks like someone built that with spite and recycled toaster parts. It's single-use, but it can send one of us out of here." "Great. So you go. I'll stay. I've always wanted to haunt a cave." Vea stared at him. "You're not a soldier." "No, I'm a persistent nuisance with above-average luck. And you've got the data, the skills, and the brooding warrior aesthetic. You go." She hesitated. For a moment, her eyes betrayed something other than calculation, something like concern, or possibly heartburn. "The data won't matter if the consortium destroys this site before the upload finishes. Then you'll have to stop them from the outside. And you'll stay here, with no weapons. I've got charm and a screwdriver." She didn't answer. The ground shook again, stronger this time. Cracks split the far wall. A sound like cracking knuckles echoed from the passage behind them. Vea looked down at the teleshifter, then at Marcus. "You'll probably die." He gave her a crooked smile. "Yeah, but heroically, maybe even sarcastically." She didn't argue. She pressed the device into his hand, initiated the sequence, then stepped back. "You ever come back this way?" Marcus said, voice lighter than his eyes. "Bring snacks." Vea nodded once. "Don't get killed." "No promises." The shifter activated, surrounding her in a shimmer of light, and in a blink, she was gone. Marcus turned to the console and sighed. "All right, Marcus," he muttered, flexing his fingers. "Time to do something incredibly stupid." The mercenaries burst through the cracked wall, weapons raised, eyes scanning, and locking on him. He raised both hands. "Hi, I'd like to talk to you about your car's extended warranty." They didn't laugh, but they didn't shoot immediately either. That was enough. He dove behind the terminal, yanking loose a bundle of exposed conduits and jamming his screwdriver into the core. The cavern surged with energy. The mercs fired. Plasma bolts tore through the air. One scorched his shoulder, another missed his leg by inches. He howled, both in pain and defiance, as the upload hit 90%. "You're going to have to do better than that," he yelled. "I've had dental visits more traumatic than this." 95. The console started sparking. The screen flickered. Marcus slammed his hand onto the final sequence as one of the mercs closed in, rifle raised. The upload hit 100%. Boom, Marcus whispered. Then everything went white. And when he opened his eyes, he was surrounded by clean light and antiseptic air. A ceiling of smooth alloy gleamed above him. He tried to sit up and groaned. Still alive, he croaked. That's weird. A figure moved into view. Blonde hair, long ears. A look of disapproval masked with a faint trace of relief. Vea? He squinted. I thought I told you to save the universe without me. You were unconscious and bleeding. That's just how I rest. She folded her arms. You passed out on top of the control core. Dramatically, I hope. Like a tired giraffe collapsing. He grinned, then winced. So, the data? Transmitted, public. The consortium is in retreat. Investigations are underway. You did it. We did it. Marcus looked around the medbay. This place got cable? Vea rolled her eyes. Rest. You'll need it. For what? She turned toward the door. We've been assigned a joint post. He blinked. Wait, together? You're surprisingly good at improvising and surviving. You're surprisingly bad at stabbing people you like. She paused at the door, looking back. You talk too much. He smiled. But admit it, you'd miss it. She didn't answer. But as she walked away, there was a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. And for the first time, Marcus wasn't running or hiding or faking his way through. He was exactly where he was meant to be.